Dramatic pause.
And we're live. We don't have intro music for this yet, do we? Oh man. Well, welcome everybody. This is This Week in Real Estate, the very first episode. And I really can't think of anybody that I'd rather have on this first episode. So you guys are awesome. So our plan is that we're going to run this every Monday morning around 10 o'clock. 10:15 is close to 10 o'clock. So we'll call this a win.
Hey.
And we're going to talk just about real estate.
Inaugural show. You're allowed to be a little late.
That's it. We're working out the bugs. So, of course, we've got our friend Bryan Nale from Primis Mortgage, and he's going to be a regular fixture on this as long as I don't run him off or anything. And we'll talk about, always get a weekly update on mortgage rates and that kind of thing. And then also, obviously, mortgage, especially right now, more than maybe ever, fits into the movement, the things that are happening within the overall real estate market. So definitely want to include him on that. We're always going to have, as long as they'll show up, another member of the J Harmon Home Team. So this week we've got Mr. Brett Garner, and we'll rotate some of the others out as well, just to get out there and discuss this. And we talk all the time, and usually we end up with, man, we should have recorded that. So anyway, now we're going to, and then we always like to have other members of the real estate community. And my friend Brad Hopkins here with Exit Realty, Bob Lamb and Associates. I can't think of a better first guest. I respect this guy immensely. There's a handful of agents out there that if I'm struggling with something, I would ask them, what do you think about that? And Brad happens to be one of those. He also happens to be a big Blue Raider fan and supporter. So that certainly doesn't hurt, does it, Bryan?
It's always good to share that bond.
It's definitely a perk, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, I don't know about this season, if it's a perk or not, or
we're about to run the table. We're going to be 8-4. Everybody's still going to be bitter and angry, but we're going to be 7-5 or 8-4. You watch.
Yeah.
Basketball's right around the corner.
Yeah. Now you sound like a Kentucky fan. Right? Yeah. Man, oh man. And of course, as always, we got Mr. Trent Denson over here adjusting and tweaking and programming and pushing buttons and whatever else it is that Trent does. So we love us some Trent Denson.
Hey, Brad's a past coffee talker and table talker
yep.
too.
Yeah. He's been on a couple times with us, and I'll never forget. There was one we met over at Brass Horn, and it was so dang loud in there.
Oh God, it was. Yeah, it was.
Remember
packed.
that?
Yeah, I think Jamie Averwater was there.
Yep.
And
I was there. I was
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
And
I don't think we had
myself,
headphones or any of that. We just had the big directional mic in there. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Reminiscing about back in the day. Now
That
we
was
have
a great episode.
we have a studio to shoot in. We have somebody that actually knows what they're doing behind the scenes.
I know.
Not
So-
just Jonathan pushing a button on a computer and hoping for the best.
I know we're all live music guys. I love going to see a bluegrass band when they kind of have one mic and they swoop in and out.
No,
It doesn't work on a podcast.
no, not at all.
No, bluegrass, we are not appreciators, perhaps. But anyway, so I think the best thing to do is just to kind of launch in. We actually had a fantastic conversation off the mics just a few minutes ago. So I'd like to try to pick that back up. Before we do that, let's get right now, as of this morning, what are rates sitting? And when we ask this question, as you watch, we're always going to go with a 30-year best credit possible, right? So best case scenario, 30-year, 20% down fixed rate. Where are we at?
So I think you're going to see that coming in the low sevens, about 7.25. Right in the middle of the low sevens.
Gotcha. So I have a question, because Brad and I both looked it up before we got before you got here, and it said that the average rate, and I don't even know what the source was. It was just Google search.
Yeah, it was just a Google.
It said that the average rate for a 30-year conventional 20% down was 8.09. Is that just some kind of a conglomeration of every credit score and every?
Yeah, probably. I mean, if you're looking at the national average, you're going to have all kinds of credit scores on there, and it may be an APR thing versus an interest rate thing too. So you're seeing a lot of points in the market right now. So if somebody's going to come in with a rated at 7, their APR may be 7 3/4 because they've got so many points they're using to buy the rate down. So that's another part of it too. I don't know if that's quoting an APR or an interest rate.
Gotcha. So is your 7 and
That's
a quarter ish is
7 1/4 ish. Ish.
He's supposed to give you all these caveats, and I
It's
said,
a
"Don't give me all the
zestimate, like,
freaking
no.
caveats."
Yeah, Jonathan was like, I don't have to answer to the regulators like you do and say an interest rate number. I'm like,
He's like,
okay,
"Yeah,
so
but
I
I'm
can give
sitting
you a
here
number
sweating."
and you can say it, and then he would come live and he's like, hey, what's the number? Don't give me the estimate. Give me the number.
I do apologize for that.
So yeah, there you go. But that would be a base rate.
Gotcha. So one thing that next week you're going to be kind of the focus of this podcast. I really want to learn more about the difference in an APR and
Sure.
like what does that mean? So if Brett's a lender and he tells me 7 3/4 and you tell me 7 1/4, but then I find out that your APR is actually 8, that's weird,
Right.
and I want to understand that better.
Yeah, we could definitely do that. That's a good tease. Tune in next week for
Yeah,
an interesting conversation about interest rates.
So we don't need to talk about it this week because Brad's smarter than me for sure. I'm sure he understands that completely.
Nah, I mean, not completely for sure. I get how points and stuff factor into it, but I definitely am not an expert. I'll be listening. So
Outstanding. So Brad, I think we started the question earlier when we got into this conversation about how do you feel, right? Because ultimately economics is emotion, group emotion with money tied to it.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, right? So how do you feel the market is going right now? Like the classic realtor question. So how's the market?
I think I heard it summed up best the other day is that right now sellers are living 12 months in the past and buyers are living 12 months in the future. And
That's good.
That's
a great
where,
analogy.
they think that they can get everything they want, that we're in this buyer's market and sellers think we're still in a seller's market.
Mhm.
And we're really just kind of in between. And I think that's probably a really accurate way to assess it.
And I fought for a long time to put a time frame on that, and especially a short time frame, which ultimately 12 months is a pretty short time frame. But I think you might be right. I'm coming around to that's about where we are right now. Brett, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's situation is going to be a little bit different, but I believe that everybody's got their barometer, like we were talking about earlier, their yardstick, and they're looking at that, whether it is a midterm election thing, whether it's get past the holidays, whether it's after New Year's. I mean, it's whatever that barometer is that they're looking at, and that's measuring all of their buying habits right now. So people are making adjustments as they have to.
Well, and I think so for me, if I'm classifying where we are right now, it's a whole lot of let's wait and see, right?
Mhm.
And I think that 24-month window that you just kind of threw out there leads to, well, let's wait and see. I would just call it hesitation right now. To your point earlier, there is real estate transactions happening. They're definitely less than there were last year at this time.
Right.
But if we were to go back and look at 2016, 2017, how do we compare there? And I don't have those numbers. We'll have to.
We're
get
really
those.
close, and it's and we considered that a hot market. I just
Mhm.
it's just degrees of hotness at this point. Like we're still, and it just feels cold because it's so much different than where we were at. But if I told you in 2016 that we'd have your house off the market in a few weeks and we're going to get you $120,000 more than you paid for it 3 years ago, you'd be tickled to death.
Mhm.
And that's just not, people don't get excited about that anymore because they've just got their mindset to where it should be more. It should be more.
Right.
I feel like we've been running a sprint for the last 24 months. And then all of a sudden we were like, oh, wait, it's supposed to be a marathon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always
the way
like
it
the
felt.
moving sidewalk analogy. Right.
That was
Sure,
the one I was
yeah.
saying that I heard
Yeah.
on a podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was.
I use that one all the time.
Yeah.
We've been walking down the moving sidewalk and it's been going pretty fast. And all of a sudden we get to the end of it and it feels like we hit a wall, which we're still walking forward. But
Right.
yeah. And I read closings are down 40% this month September to September. And here's the thing we were talking about, to me, it's like a pendulum, right? So we were way high last year, 31% appreciation last year, ridiculous number of sales. the 120,000 plus,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes over your asking price. I mean, like crazy stuff, right? And now we've swung, and I think in order to get to a normalization, there's a process, and sometimes that process includes the opposite extreme for a little bit of time until it kind of settles in the middle.
And I don't know what your data source is and what it all includes, but me personally, my home equity line of credit closed this month last year.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of people doing refis and HELOCs and purchases all in that time period. And that was a great refi period.
Well, and last year, if you think about it, not a lot of folks weren't able to participate in the market that was last year.
Right.
Even with all the records,
mm-hmm.
And we were talking about this, they were pushed out.
And then they're coming back in,
Mm-hmm.
and they have that opportunity. So, I still feel like if it's as far as listing your home, if you've got it priced right and you get it set up to sell, it's going to go pretty quick. There's some neighborhoods that I think you've got to really get down to micro. I felt like for a while we could do everything macro, just
100%.
Throw a number on it. Everything's going,
Sure.
Everything's gone. But now you've really got to focus on, well, does this neighborhood have 2 listings or 7?
Mm-hmm.
And
that makes a huge difference.
It makes a huge difference. And so you've really got to, I was looking at a neighborhood the other day and there were 6 for sale on that street. And it's like, okay, well, this is a completely different price point than I just listed one in Eagle where nothing goes for sale hardly ever. Right.
Right.
So, it's going to, it'll be gone. I've got 2 calls today about offer. Like it'll be gone. And we listed on Friday. And so that's a completely different market. So you've really got to get down to micro markets, I think, when you're talking about listing,
which we're totally not used to.
No,
I mean, we've gotten out of that habit, but I mean, honestly, if you were selling houses anytime in the past to about 2017, the neighborhood mattered, and this neighborhood could be touching this neighborhood, but they were not the same. There are some neighborhoods where sections of the neighborhood matter.
Mm-hmm.
I think of Berkshire. There's 3 distinct,
super popular.
4 distinct sections that they aren't the same.
Right.
I mean, they're just not. But yet for the last couple years,
it didn't matter.
Didn't matter.
I just
not at
want
all.
to be in that cluster, whatever it was.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting time for sure. So Brad, what are you doing right now? I mean, ultimately our goal is to help other people, right? But what are you doing as an agent right now to quite frankly protect your livelihood?
I think for me, it's just kind of getting back to the basics, getting back to, calling people up for coffee, asking the questions, finding what's going on in people's lives. Because I think, that's the great thing about being in residential versus commercial is people are always going to have a reason to move. I think the people that just kind of wanted to move or felt like moving, they're out of the market. But people are always having babies. People are always, unfortunately, getting divorced or passing away or getting married or
job transfer.
Like there is always going to be a natural churn, and you've just got to be in your sphere of people finding out when that is, and being there to help them and guide them through that process. So it's just getting back to coffees and market updates and, hey, here's where you're at. It's not where you were 4 months ago, but significantly better than where you were 12 months ago, like going through that with them.
And you bring that up. That's an interesting point. I've had this conversation with a few folks very recently. If you had sold in February or if you had sold in September last year, how has the market shifted in, those kind of benchmark times?
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't really seen a pullback on pricing necessarily, but the process is completely different.
Got to be patient. That's the big thing. And I think I think people are in a panic when they don't get the instant offer kind of thing. But when you say you hadn't seen a pullback in pricing, I'm sorry, I leaned away from the microphone. I can't do that. I think there's a little bit of pullback in pricing, but it's still year over year way higher. And I use the example of I just had one over in Kingdom Ridge back in August. We did some Four Corners new construction out in the Maples, and when we went under contract, and it was like a 10-month lead time because they hadn't even pushed dirt yet. We said, hey, we're probably going to be at about 440. Well, things had gotten so hot between November of last year and the summer of this year. They're like, we want over 5. We saw this, and it's like, well, we can give it a try, but it feels high. So we ended up getting 485 for it, which was 45,000 more than what we said we would in November when we went through this whole process. But it still, to them, felt like we didn't get what we should for our house.
But I think that's being used to a pace of appreciation.
Right. And so we just got to, but that's what I'm saying. Like the mindset, and it still goes to buyers are in the past, or buyers are in the future, sellers are in the past. They felt like they should get that level of appreciation, and it's not there.
But what I haven't seen is comparable home in the same neighborhood sold at, use your number there, 500 in June, right? And now that same house is going to sell for 460.
Yep.
I haven't seen that, but it sold at 500 in June. Now it might sell at 505, or 500 again, even, or we start, what is comparable, right? We really start to pick that apart. Well, this one had granite countertops and had, whatever. And this one had Formica countertops, and the yard had a electric tower in the back, or something. You know what I mean?
Well, the interesting thing that I've seen too, you've got some of these REI guys, the flippers, and flip properties that they bought at kind of the peak in the last, prior to 10 months ago. Their square foot price is way out of line, and they thought they were going to have that, that appreciation in that time period. And they just didn't get there. They may wind up taking a bath on several projects. May not put them out of business, but it's not the heyday prior to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have seen a little bit of what I would call a price reduction in some area, like, in some townhouses and some things that I monitor through rental properties. There's a couple out there off Church Street, and it's even bizarre. There's 3 out there listed in Cottage Glen that are all listed in the high 270s to low 280s. And those were getting close to 3 over the summer. But the really odd thing is over in Charleston, which had properties in both, and Cottage Glen was always 10 to 15,000 higher than Charleston South, and the identical build, same builder, same everything. One just went under contract at 289 over there, and there's 3 sitting at 279 over in Cottage Glen. Like I can't put my finger on it. Like,
well, and
it's just there's a little bit of turmoil there. Like I don't,
and I will tell you, and I've experienced, and I've said this even when we crashed in 09. You saw it. Is townhouses are they're the leading indicator of, they're the most volatile options, right? Your 3-bed, 2-bath, 2-car garage, single family home. Much if it's plotting out a roller coaster, it's the kiddie coaster. If you're plotting out the townhouses, hold on to your seats, baby. It could be a wild ride. They'll go up faster and they'll go down faster and earlier.
Yeah. And the condos, which we don't deal with a lot here.
Too much.
We got the columns, and
there's like 5 total.
Yeah, there's only a few.
Not a lot, but those also take a quick dip. I mean, I noticed one that came on the market next to you Friday, and $10,000 less than what it would have.
Yep. It's interesting. So Bryan, what are you seeing right now as far as people that are coming to you, getting that pre-qual, getting that information? Because I still think that the majority of people know that that's kind of the first step. They might talk to one of us and then come to talk to you. Maybe they come to talk to you first. But what are you seeing? What's the pulse from your perspective?
Excuse me. You guys kind of hit on it. The FHA buyer is back. So as and you mentioned that, we're seeing some buyers return to the market, and that's kind of who that is. It's the person who's got a 680 credit score and a little bit of money for a down payment, or maybe they want to go THTA because now that's back too. So those clients are able to get something, whereas before it was like this. And if you don't have great credit to get a good interest rate and good income to be able to qualify for a conventional loan, it's going to be difficult for you to even go under contract. So it was
at least in Rutherford County for sure.
Right. And I'd say for a lot of Middle Tennessee, that was the case. So yeah, I can send you a pre-qualification letter, and also there's a line you cross where a lot of times conventional makes more sense, but when the credit score gets into that, anything below 700, that's what FHA really excels in. And you look at the options with PMI and mortgage insurance and how they kind of carry over from conventional with a 3 or a 5% down payment for a first time home buyer versus an FHA with a 3.5% down. And the FHA is going to be the better product for them. But you tell people, listen, if we go into this with an FHA, your likelihood of winning the offer is not going to be as strong as if we take this loan that may be a little bit worse in the terms, but you're going to be able to actually go under contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost stigmatize the buyer when you, especially if you went with THDA or something like
Or
that.
VA. Yeah, that was tough.
Mm-hmm.
So it's for me, and I think this is in some senses what we all really wanted was a return to normalcy and a return to a market, a healthy market. Somebody should be able to go out there and decide which loan they want to use for their financing. If they're qualified and you've got a good lender, it shouldn't matter if it's FHA or conventional, right? If the lender can get the job done, that person's going to close and they're going to buy the house either way. It doesn't matter to the seller 9 out of 10 times, as long as you've got a good lender. So that's to me. And the other thing too is if I'm buying a house, I want to be able to shop. I want to go look at 3 or 4 houses and say, well, that one's got Formica, but this one's got granite. I'm willing to pay a little bit more for the granite. Or maybe, hey, I can save some money and buy the one with Formica.
Put granite in myself.
And in a year or two, I get a bonus, or I'll be able to save up and I'll do a little remodel and put it in granite myself. So it's nice for your home buyers to be able to shop some. I think it's and, the rate where we are now and where it may go is a burden though. For at the same time that I'm saying these things about those buyers are back, there's also the wages and the debt to income ratios that we're watching and how difficult it is for customers and home buyers to be able to jump up from, hey, I could do something at 4% at the beginning of the year that I can't do now at 7
1.25-ish.
Well, the trend I'm ready to see come back is in new construction, and that's buyers being able to make some decisions, kind of like what you're talking about. Even the semi-custom guys, when things were crazy and we had all the supply chain issues, they were pretty much like, yep, this is what you're getting, period. And now I think that those builders are going to start shifting gears and being a little more accommodating to people, because their properties are going to stay on market even after completion, I think, in the near future.
Yeah. And I think we're going to be able to get a little more creative as buyers too, and start reaching out for things like, is this loan assumable? If I've got $200,000 cash to make up the difference, you owe 300, you're going to net 5, and I can still get your 3% interest rate,
or a purchase HELOC, or there's all kinds of.
You're going to start seeing buyers be able to get a little more creative and have a little more flexibility in things that people wouldn't even consider before.
Alternative financing, whatever that looks like for them.
Well, and we've talked, I know you and I have talked multiple times all through this process. I mean, think about it. If you're sitting on a 1 point something interest rate or a 2 point something interest rate, you've got something marketable.
Yeah, you do.
I mean, you've got something marketable, even if it's a $500,000 house and it's only got $100K left, right? That's okay.
There's enough cash buyers out there, or people that are cash flush, especially as they're selling these properties that they've gotten so much equity in the last 3 years. So
just keep in mind that that's going to need to be an FHA mortgage that you have.
Conventionals are not.
Correct. So how many mortgages were done in the last 3 or 4 years that were FHA mortgages?
It's an interesting point, but even if it was done 5 years ago, if we see rates hit 8,
it's a 4.25,
right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, it's definitely something as a listing agent, we need to start talking to our clients and say, okay, what do you have mortgage wise on this? How much is left? I mean, we do that anyway to get net proceeds, but let's market that.
Right.
And then get with somebody that knows how to, because there's a process, I assume, with an assumable rate.
So yeah, you need to go back to your buyer, whoever's buying the house, would need to go back to the lender who wrote the note, and they need to apply for an assumed mortgage with that one. So like if Regions did my FHA loan, then I would need to go to Regions, and you're going to buy that house from me and try to assume my mortgage, then you would need to go to Regions to apply.
Interesting. What if that lender doesn't exist anymore?
Like whoever's servicing,
okay.
I think you would just need to go back to whoever's servicing that loan at that point.
Got it. That's interesting. We could do a whole show on that.
Yeah.
I mean, that, and I think points too. So a lot of times I'm talking, and I've got and we can dive into this next week, but you need to look at what's going to be the better thing for you. Is it going to be to tie up an extra $10,000 in principal? Now, granted, that's still your money. It's still part of your net worth. Or is it better to pay that in points to buy the rate down, try to make that up over time? So you're getting into big gambles on, not huge gambles, but you're kind of betting on the market. Do you think you'll be able to refinance in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years?
Or what's your what's your time frame that you're going to be in that home? What we were talking about, and maybe you look at an ARM.
Yeah, I mean, I think for where we're at right now, and most people not stayed in their home 7 years, I think that's a pretty reasonable route for people to go.
But you got to educate them. You got to have a lender that says, here's the deal. At 7 years, if you're still there, this is going to happen, you know? So either you need to make sure you're not there, or be sure you're ready
to refinance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, be sure you're well educated and follow the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if you, a lot of times, and in 7 years, maybe the rate's more favorable, so when it adjusts, it doesn't hurt you. But maybe we go all the way to 8.5% with rates, and when they start to cool down, they only fall back into the 6s or the high 5s. We can all have our crystal balls and projections, but at the end of the day, they're just projections.
Yeah, well, and they could change tomorrow from what they were today. If we've seen anything in the last,
they're probably going to change in 16 days for sure, right? Or 19 or whatever we're at.
Brad and I were playing golf with Trent on Friday, and I was like, "Hey, the market's down about a quarter. Hey, the market's actually up a quarter now. It's a 50 basis point move, and then hey, it's back to zero. It's flat now."
Yeah,
it was just all over the place.
Yeah.
Well, our memories are naturally short, and we tend to forget bad things pretty quickly. So I think it's all going to be like we discussed earlier. Whatever your pressure point is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, I got one more topic, and then we'll wrap it up. I'm just curious, Brad. I want to get your take on this. So I'd asked you about what you're doing to guard yourself as an agent. How do you feel about? Let's see. How do I frame this question the right way? When the market was doing what it was doing for the last 3 years, there was a whole lot of people that saw what we did as easy money, fast, easy money.
Low-hanging fruit.
And unfortunately, for some, they were able to make easy money.
Mm-hmm.
Now that the market is doing what it's doing now, and it's shifting and it's changing and it's evolving and it's doing it very, very rapidly, what do you think the population of licensees is going to look like? Let's give it a 6-month window on this one, Brad.
I think we're going to see some people pull out. They're going to, at least not be attempting to do it full time. Maybe, they didn't have enough setback. They weren't in this long enough to weather storms, and then so I think you're going to see that. It's going to be harder. Well, what did I say last week or a couple of weeks ago? Only 20% of agents in our association had done more than 4 transactions over the past 12 months.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. So that was.
I have not heard that.
I've not heard that. I mean, that's the 80-20 rule.
Right. It's the 80-20 rule. But yeah, 4 so 80% of the agents out there had done 4 transactions or less. It can't be sustainable for a consistent amount of time. It's going to have to change. That's not a full-time job for most people. But also, unfortunately, in my mind, and for our career, a lot of people aren't full-time agents. So, will those numbers still stay the same? I don't know. I do know that I go to MTAR every 2 months, and there is a packed room full of folks still coming charging into it. So
I've taught a lot of those classes.
Yeah. So it's again, I'd probably do as well to predict the stock market as I would people thinking that they can come into this business. So, I think a lot of it will also depend on the overall economy, because as people, if we do see some pullback on employment overall, I think a lot of people think this is a fallback and they'll try to jump into it.
That's interesting,
because that happened during COVID, right? When a lot of people were like, "Oh, our job went away. Let's go sell real estate. Let's go sell real estate." So, will we see the same thing if there's an overall economic downturn that doesn't necessarily affect housing? Because I think even if we had a downturn, I don't know that it's going to hit housing super hard. I think
no, it'll be
we're still pretty protected with
We-
the
well,
economic growth we have.
we still have, it may be down a little bit, but roughly 20 people a day move into the area, and we're underbuilt. Like
Right.
If I
For
don't know if
sure.
y'all went to the Edsel Charles thing the other day, but we're still underbuilt. So I don't see that going away.
Mhm.
What was the statistic that you gave me last week? In 2009, 40%.
60.
Oh, 60%.
Yeah,
I'm
from
sorry.
from 05 to 09, 60% of licensees retired their license.
Now, obviously, a much different climate than what we're experiencing.
And that's just the state of Tennessee, by the way.
right.
So I don't think we're gonna
No.
hit anything similar to that. But I mean, it always is interesting when I do teach the class at MTAR. I ask, why did you get into this? You've got 70, 80 people sitting in the room. Why are you here?
Yeah.
And inevitably, at least one honest person says, because I had an agent and I figured I could do it better than them, and it looked like easy money. I mean, and the reality is, if there's 70 people in the room, probably 30 of them have that story.
Well, and they may have had that experience.
Mhm.
I mean,
No, especially in the
There's-
last year or two. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean,
if you're not honing your skills every day,
But-
that's different. It's
but
not
that
a
also
career.
goes to I feel like if we do our job right, it should look easy. That's part of the problem, right? Like if you're in communication and you're doing all the things, like the things that make it hard shouldn't come up as much. So
Right.
like I hope people look at it and go, man, that seemed easy, because that means I did it right.
Right.
Yeah.
And what a lot of folks don't see is what happens when we're not talking, right?
Right.
When we've got our face in the computer and we're studying, and when we're previewing houses, and when we're, making the connections to make things happen, and when we're talking to Bryan over a drink, but we're still talking business, or whatever.
planning an open house.
Planning
Those are
an open
coming
house.
back.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
good to see
or-
that kind of
My
stuff.
goodness,
Right.
there's been a lot of open houses in the last month.
Well, yeah, that's when you talk about, we call it pie time, pen time, whatever you want to call it, productive, indirectly productive, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
We're going to spend the vast majority in that indirectly productive time that nobody sees.
That's right.
Right. Like only roughly 10 to 20% is going to be showing houses, writing contracts, that sort of thing. The vast majority of our time is doing the things to create that productive time.
That's right.
And people don't see that. And that's why I think a lot of people get into the business with not knowing that they're going to have to do that. And that's the reason. What is it? You probably know the stats from MTAR. What's the roughly 60% don't renew their license
Right.
after the first time?
Yeah.
So-
It fluctuates, but yeah, it can be as high as 70.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's
So-
a glamorous life.
yeah. Yeah. So,
Well, I got stories for you.
well, and I don't think people fully grasp that whole, if I don't get something closed this month, I just rolled a 0 for this
That's
month.
it.
And you can only do
Yeah,
that so many times before you're like, oh God, I've got to go get a job,
Mhm.
and so it's just one of those things, like it's going to wash people out for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Last thing, you guys, closing remarks, I guess.
I wasn't prepared for that.
Yeah.
Well, now you are.
I hear you.
Bryan, you got anything?
I was watching Brett squirm a little bit more.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Isn't it?
I personally am kind of excited to see what happens, to watch it all play out.
Mhm.
And I do think that because of where we are and the commitments of economic growth that are already coming here, even if job markets in other places take a turn, our job market, I think, is going to stay very healthy. So I just hold out and see what the future holds. And, I think we're just going to return to that more normal sales cycle.
Yeah, I think I think I'm overall optimistic about where we're heading. I do think that there was that pause, like there's just that panic of rates and elections and all the things that make people just kind of slow down. And then I think once it's all baked in, I think we're going to start seeing some of these inflation numbers. They're just baked in. It's not going to continue to grow because we're going to start overlapping it, so to speak. And
Mhm.
so I think that'll kind of calm everybody down. And then we just get back to what I said earlier. People have to move, and they're not gonna put it off anymore. And
Right.
you know,
It is what it is.
it just
attitude.
it's just baked in, and we've got to go back to living life. And I think that's going to happen sooner rather than later, especially as the the news cycle changes and some of the gloom and doom is not going to be, in 16 days or whatever. I think you're going to see the story change a little bit, even if the facts haven't changed that much at all. I think the presentation of the story is going to change, and people are just going to accept it for what it is and get back into their normal buying habits.
Yeah.
So.
The great philosopher John Anderson once said, "Time marches on."
Yeah.
So, my closing thoughts, and we know inflation is driving this interest rate environment. It's all driven to try to stop inflation. So what we're going to be looking for is that kind of the consumer price index and the producer price index. When those start to kind of give us the signs that recession or the inflation may be slowing, I'm not looking for interest rates to start coming down immediately. I think that, if we're listening to what the Federal Reserve is telling us, they do not want to start easing too soon. They want to keep it level and steady because they don't want a repeat of what happened in the 80s.
Sure, it doesn't make sense to bring it down and then immediately.
Yeah. So they want to make sure that inflation is fully under control, because in the 70s, in the late 70s, early 80s, it looked like inflation was under control. They started to lower rates and put mechanisms into place to make rates lower. And inflation came roaring back, and it was worse than it was before. It's like it's almost like a horror movie. You want to make sure Jason is dead, 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 because if you let that off the gas too soon, or off the brakes too soon, maybe I should say, then it could come back really bad.
Yeah.
So when you start to see that kind of news, like, hey man, it looks like this, inflation's back under control, and things, don't expect your mortgage rates and your HELOC rates and prime rates and things like those, credit card rates, don't expect those to just immediately start to get better.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I think this first episode was a hit. Brad, always a pleasure. Thanks for being here with us.
Hey, bring me back anytime. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, man. All right, Brett, thanks.
I'm sure we'll see all of you around town somewhere. We usually do bump into one another later on.
Pretty regular.
It's only Monday morning.
That's it. All right. One last thing. One last thing. 15 seconds. Okay. Notes Live Amphitheater. For it or against it. Go on the record.
Love it.
Love it.
I'm excited about it.
Can't wait.
Yeah. We're all in agreement on this. All right. Yeah. Outstanding. Okay.
Hey.
Trent, thank you very much. Thank you for watching. This has been the very first episode of This Week in Real Estate. Tune in again next week at 10 o'clock ish. And we'll talk mortgages next week. Thanks.